All right, everyone, welcome to this Vizions digital tutorial. In this tutorial, we're going to talk about call to actions. So these buttons, whatever button that's clickable, that's leading a customer to an action, and how to optimize these within Wix so that they look better and they increase the conversion rates. So I'll give you an example of what not to do. So I just made this, created this in a fake mock-up of our website just to show how tempting is this to click compared to how tempting is this to click, or how tempting is this to click compared to this, with the animation, with the expansion. Here all you have is a change of color, the corners around it. So we're going to talk about the different ways to optimize it so that you increase conversion rates for your website. So in our case, this is the buttons we have now. We might A/B test them, so test them in the future to see if there are things we can improve to make them better. But for now, this is what we found was best to convert. So before I start this training, I just want to mention we have 12 trainings for service businesses. So how to optimize your SEO, your website. So let me just show you here. So as you see here, SEO training, website optimization training, and offsite optimization training. If you want to download these, they're going to be free. So if you want to download those, they're going to be linked in the description below. You can download it and learn a little bit on how to optimize your website. We have a whole section going over the call to actions, so how to optimize these fully. In this video, I'm just going to go into how to set this up within Wix. So the first thing you want to keep in mind, so here we are in the Wix editor. First thing you want to keep in mind when you're doing these buttons is basically you want to make them as likely to be clicked as possible. So what does that mean? Well, you want to make them look like the real buttons, that they're 3D, that the person could click through them to the screen. Basically, you want to make it as enticing as possible for them to click it. Now, why you do that? Why should you do that? Well, that increases conversion rates. That increases the likelihood that the person will end up contacting you. You might think it's not that big of an effect. In some cases, it's not. In some cases, it's a huge effect. Sometimes people, they might be confused. They might see this and they might not even think it's a button. They might see this, and they think, okay, well, if this isn't a button, this isn't a button, and then, but if they see something like this makes it a lot clearer in their mind that this is a button. You have the icon, you have the call to action, so you have the actual wording that states that there's an action to be taken if you click this button. There's a little bit of shadow, the lighting, the border. It just makes it a little bit more it makes it feel more like a button, like something you are to click to get somewhere else. This just feels like a section of your website, which might lead you to lower conversion rates. You might not think it does, but there's stats out there. I don't have them pulled up right now, but I have them in the training. So if you ever download the design training, one of our 12 trainings there, you're going to get access to all the statistics that we share in there on why it's important to set this up. So now here we have it. So let's say the get started button. The number one thing I'm going to mention is, because all these optimizations, they come to little standards, but number one thing is size. So if your button's too small, it's not going to be seen. If it's not going to be seen, it's not going to be clicked. So first thing you want is to set it up as big as you can that fits your site's aesthetic. In our case, because of the mobile version of our website and the way Wix is structured, we cannot, we don't believe it's worth it to have a button bigger than this, just because after that it looks odd on mobile. There's ways around this, but in this case, we're going to do this way. So first thing would be size. Second thing I would say is color. You want the color to pop, and if not pop, you want it to be a gradient that pops. So the way you could set this up is, if I were to go here, actually you would have to use the Wix. Wix has a gradient type button. So if you go to, let me go back to the center. So if I were to start here, you will go to the section buttons. You go here to this button here, contact us. You would attach this to your section. And then this one's going to have the gradient. I believe the gradient is going to perform better than just a stale color for most buttons. In our case, we have, as you can see, we have gradient here and we have stale. It's just a contrast of colors so that people, if ever they didn't think this was a button, there's a high likelihood they're going to think this is a button. So you see, it's just little tricks. There's different ways to optimize. You could get 1% better every time. There's so many things you could do. So let's delete the other one and let's modify this here. All right, so first thing, as I mentioned again, size. Let's just make it ridiculously big just for the sake of this video. There you have it. You want to follow your brand. So obviously, if your brand has red colors, you're going to want it red. In our case, we have the blue. So you would decide here. So you would choose the different colors you want. The white is not a bad idea. I think if you have a black background, the white is good. If you have a white background, white is still good in a sense, because you want it to be as bright as possible. You want the colors to flash. You want the colors to attract attention. In our case, since we have a black background, well, everything that's blue is really going to pop. That's really going to pop in and capture the attention. If you had a white background, maybe you do something different. But in any case, you want some colors that are a little bit more poppy. So, in this situation here, there's this color here that's chosen. I would recommend something that pops even more. So maybe something in the wider range. So let's go back actually and set it up like this. And maybe here you could have something, like a darker blue or something. And then the font, you could change it to be dark. You could always, there's so many ways to play around it, but in any case, you want something that really pops up. And let's just say the font, we're going to turn it to 40. Is that going to be too big? Yeah, so 30. Okay. So just to give you an idea, this pops up a lot more. Now, obviously, it doesn't look good with the rest of the brand, but just to give you an example, one thing I'd also recommend is you could have the darker part at the bottom and the lighter part at the top. It just makes it look like it's 3D. So I'm going to switch this up here. So let's go back to the colors. You will go here and fill the colors. You would put the dark part here. So the darker part at the bottom, and then from dark to lighter. Something like this. And then what that's going to do is just going to make it pop a little bit more like a button. It's going to make it look there for that. Now, the text. Second element is going to be the text. So what you want for the text is you want something to be directing the consumer to take action. I would recommend putting in all caps, but now we're getting to minute details. But here, let's say, contact us is not direct enough. It's book a call, take an appointment, call us now. You could always add some adjectives. You could always add some words to it. But let's say in the case, if we had a form to fill out, there may be an appointment to take, it's take an appointment or book an appointment. And there you would have it. So in this case, I'm just going to change the font back down actually. So if I were to go here, text, I put the font at 25. Actually, we're going to have an icon after, so let's put it to 23, even 21. Okay, like this. The font, obviously you want it to follow the rest of your website. In our case, we have a sign font. So we're going to have this here. So it just makes it appear a little bit better. For the color of the text, you're going to have to match it with the background. In this case, I don't really have an idea for the best color. I might have to test them out a little bit. Let me see, this is too bright. This seems a little too dark. Well, you know what? You could even go ahead and do something like this. So in this case, we do this. And then the other thing here is you want to apply the shadow. So the reason you want to apply the shadow, it just makes it pop a lot more. So if we go back to our website here, you see this pops a lot more than having something here that wouldn't have a shadow. You see, this doesn't have a shadow. This is not a clickable button, but this has a shadow, just engages people a little bit more. So what you would want to do is you want to apply, actually this is the text shadow. So I'm not going to do this. We're going to cover this here. So for the text, you most likely don't want to add the shadow. Let me add the shadow now. So you go add shadow. And then I would recommend a little bit of an angle here. And if you have a black background, you have a white shadow. If you have a white background, you have a black shadow. So here you have it. Now distance, you can play around with these, see which one fits best. I always like to have a pretty significant blur. And then, well, this is way too big. Distance, you probably make it size something like this. Distance, you could put it lower. Even I would say 1. And then the size maybe at 6. Then the blur a little bit less heavy. And then you could always play here with the color intensity and the opacity of the color. So in our case, we're just going to make it a little bit lower. Let's go back to 25%. Wait until it loads. So it should be good here. So as you can see, it captures a little bit of attention. You could always play around with it. This one's a little bit stronger, but just for this case of this video, I'm not going to go into that too deep. There's so many ways to modify it depending on your website. So I'm not going to go into that too much. You could also add other shadows. I would recommend just one. For most cases, it's going to be enough, sufficient. Now, after that, you have the borders. Now I'm going back and forth, but we were at text for the shadows. But here we have the borders. I'd recommend putting a border, especially if you have a black background. You can put the white border. If you have a white background, maybe you could put the color of your logo or whatever brand as the background, as the border. So here, let's say we have the white one. You go 2 pixels. I recommend 2 pixels. Seems to be the best size. And now we're going to get this border going. So here you have it. You have a little bit of a border. Let me publish it just so we could see the actual results. Let's see here. Let me refresh. So you see you're going from this to this. So already you feel like this is a lot more engaging of a button, compared to what we had before, or even if we were to compare to this, which in some businesses they have buttons that look like this. So this is a lot more engaging, but there's much more we could still do. So now that we're back in here, the other thing we're going to do is, let me go here. We're going to go to, so we did borders. So we added the border here. You could do corners. Now there is some statistics showing that having rounded corners on a button increases conversion rates. So I would recommend having rounded corners. You could always test without rounded corners, with rounded corners. There's so many ways to test these things, but in most cases I would say yes, and I would recommend 10 pixel rounded corners usually tends to look pretty good. So I'm just going to lock it so that everything's at 10. Oops, 100 is going to be way too expressive. So 10. So if we see here, a little bit of rounding in the corner, just makes it appear a little bit better. There you have it there. Now, let's get back onto it here. You have the layout. So layout is just the padding in between the text, I believe. So if I were to go here and say 10, I would unlock it actually. And I would go 20. Yeah, you see the text going to move to the left or move to the right. In most cases, you're not going to want to have that. So you could just leave it at 0 and keep it on the same for every single one. So you leave it at 0 like that. Actually, let's do this. Let's just leave it at 1. All right. Then the icon. This is something people don't utilize much, but you could use an icon here. So you could set this icon up. When you're going to go in your settings, you're going to be able to modify it. We're just going to modify the color first. So let's go here. The size, I recommend having a pretty big icon. So you see here, it's relatively big. The color, you want it to be pretty much the same color as your lettering. So in our case, it's going to be this color here. So book an appointment, you have the arrow. Arrow is not a bad one. You could always play with the rotation. What I do is I have it, you see here, I have it rotated a little bit. So it's rotated like this. In our case, it was a form. So an arrow doesn't make as much sense because if you're pointing down, but I'm going to switch it up after. So here you have it, let's say you have it pointed this way. And then if I were to go to settings, and I'm going to change this icon here, replace icon, let's call it appointment. Actually, I have to go in files, media from Wix, and then let's do appointment again. Here, let's call it calendar. I believe in calendar pops up. There you go. Okay, so we have this one. There's so many. So if you go phone, you're gonna find some. If you go call, you're gonna find some. If you go arrow, there's so many different arrows you could choose from. So you have all these. You could really get creative depending on the type of service you offer. Maybe your roofing contractor. Maybe you want to add a roof. You could add this little house. In general, I would recommend having something that directs the customer to the use case of that button. So if that button is going to lead you to a call, well, you're going to want to have a calendar. Like a booking call, you might want to have a calendar set up. So you could choose this like this. There you go. So you would have the calendar. So you see now it's tilted. Maybe even that I'm going to tilt it back a little bit less. So let's just put it at 15, just so that it doesn't tilt too much. And the reason you want the tilt is as somebody scrolls through it, this is going to move. It's just going to capture attention a little bit. So it's all these little tricks to capture attention. And what that does is that increases conversion rates in the end. So here you have it there. Now you could play around with the position. If you want it to be sticky button, you could play with that. You could adjust the size and everything, but this is more of where it's set up within your website. So now we're not going to cover this anymore. We're going to go back to settings. So again, you could change it here. You could change text and icon. You could have nothing. You could have text only, icon only, and so on. Then you could choose a link here. So if you want to link it to your website or whatever other form that you might have. And then after that, you have the layout. So you could go in layout here. You could choose whether you want it on the left, whether you want it on the right, you want it at the bottom. You want the top. So depending on the type of button you create, in most cases, I would recommend having on the right so people could read it. So because we read from left to right. So book an appointment, icon. Alignment, you could align your thing different ways. So many different variations. I'd recommend just having it this way. Seems to be the best. So now for this. So this is pretty much set. Here you have after that the animation. So this is probably the most important aspect of it. There's a few things with animations that you could do. So number one is entrance. So when somebody visits your website, what's going to happen to that button? In our case, because this is the main page and this is the first section of our website, we don't have any animations that pop up. The reason why is because it affects the speed of the website and we don't want to sacrifice it for this reason. So in our case, we didn't use it, but in your case, you can. So let's say you would do a fade. So the button's going to fade into view. You can have a glide, you can have whatever. So you see the fade. You can have a reveal. So many different ones. I like the fade one. The fade one just fits well with any type of website. Just makes it appear it's more professional. I would say. So you could do this. You could then adjust the animation depending on the duration, how long you want the feed to last, how long of a delay as soon as the person visits the website, and so on. So that's it for the entrance. Then you have the hover. So this is the one we have set up. So when someone hovers our button, the icon moves and the button expands. So you have it here. You go to hover, you go add, and you go expand. So this is the one we have here. So when somebody hovers over the button, the expansion starts. You see? And there you have it. So that's it for that. And also, I forgot to mention, but within the icon, so if I go back down to icon, and I believe actually no, here if I go to the state of the button, so if I go to state and I go to hover, we're just gonna copy everything. And that's a little trick, by the way. If ever you don't want to make it too complicated, you can set this up so that you could just press this button, and that's gonna adapt whatever you had in regular is gonna copy it in hover. So in hover, before I get into the rest, actually, you know what? Let me just cover the rest of the the animations here, and after that, I'm going to go back to how to set this up. So then you have click. So click on the element will trigger an animation. So if they click it, in most cases, this button will lead them to another page. So you don't want them to click it and have an animation. This is just going to be a use of site speed. Scroll, when you're scrolling, you could have it follow you. So you could even have it, in and out, scrolls in, scrolls out. There's different types of animation. In most cases, not going to be used. The loop one. So this animation, so we have to actually remove, I believe it's the click, hover, scroll, or mouse effect. So click, hover. So let's remove hover. Let's remove it here. So you could add a loop. So the loop is probably the one that might be most interesting to test out for conversion rate, is one that you could do like a breathe. So what that does is if I go here on the website, it's going to move around like this, but it's constantly going to do that. It's going to do that in a loop. You could always adjust it to make it less aggressive. So if I were to change the distance, and I would change it to, let's say, 5 pixel, and the duration, I can make it longer, so it just moves a little bit slower. 8 seconds, and I could do preview. See, it will move like this. So actually distance, the minimum you could put is 10. So in our case, we didn't like having it just because it doesn't look too good with our website, but that really catches attention. If you have these buttons moving around like this, people are going to understand that it's a button, something you can click. The pulse one is also a very good one. Actually, I believe the pulse would be a little bit of a better one. So you could adjust the animation so that it happens, whatever, it happens for those amount of seconds, just a little bit of a pulse. As you can see here, just something like that. And then you can repeat it, let's say, every 10 seconds. Somebody scrolling your website, they're going to see it once. They stay 10 seconds longer on that element of your website, they're going to see it another time. So that's pretty much it for these animations. I would say Pulse would be the number one to set up for conversion rates. And then, but if you want to have a hover animation, which this is why we didn't do it, because we want to have this hover animation, you can't have them both. So that's the only issue with this one. So now let's get back into how to set up the images, the hover within the colors. So the thing that I forgot to mention before was that when you have the hover, so let's see here, you see the color changes slightly. So what's happening? So the color is changing slightly. The animation, well, in this case, the animation is moving. So the little icon is moving, and then everything is expanding. So we already did the expansion. All we have to do now is to change the color and change this to move a little bit. this icon to move. So first thing you would go is now the colors. So you go to hover, and in hover, maybe you want to make everything just a little bit darker. So you go here, you will add color. Maybe you add something a little bit darker here. You go to this. You might want to add a little bit darker here. And then you go to this and you add it a little bit darker there. Just like this. So now it's going to make it so that when somebody's on hover, it's going to look like this. Somebody's on regular, it's going to look like this. It's just going to show them a little bit more that this is a clickable button. This is something you should click. So there you have it. So you can set it up for disabled too, but in most cases, it's never going to be disabled. And then, so that's it here. For the text, you could do some things on hover. You can modify it on hover. You can modify the colors on hover. You can modify it. Basically every single aspect we talked about at the beginning, you could change it within the hover section. Now for the icon, the part that I found interesting was to have this rotation back to 0. So what does that do? Well, now that if somebody's scrolling and putting their finger over the button, this little animation is going to move. So let's just see what that looks like now. Actually, before I do, I just want to make sure that I added the animation back. So you see the hover, I didn't add it back. So let's put it here. Let's remove the pulse. And let's have expand. And we're good. So let's publish this. And let's see what the results look like. Taking a little time to load. All right, view site. All right, so you see, so you have it here. So the entrance, it was a little bit of a fade. When you go on it, it changes, it tilts like this, and the hover didn't update just because I didn't refresh the page enough. Okay, the hover didn't update. So just want to make sure, expand on self, hover. Let me publish it again. Sometimes Wix bugs with these things. Refresh this page once again. No, it's still not working. Let's view the site now. There you go. Okay, so now it's working. So when you hover the button, it clicks. So you see the difference, between this and having what we had originally, which basically looked like this here. A lot more clickable, a lot more engaging, a lot more attractive to the eye, and a lot more of an understanding that this is something that's going to lead to something else. This button is going to lead to something else. So the reason why I want to make this video is because optimizing your call to action, as you see, this video is probably going to be a little bit longer than 5 minutes, but it could take you 5 minutes to do. It's really simple to do. You could do it for all your buttons, just set them up, copy and paste them, boom, boom, boom. And you could really get, 10%, 20% more conversions just because you change a button. So, tell me what in a website or tell me what in a business you could increase 10% more revenue just by changing, by doing 5 minutes of work. So really ridiculously low amount of effort and a very high reward. So we always love those. So that's pretty much it for this tutorial. If you enjoyed, please leave a like and subscribe. If you want to leave us a comment, you can leave us a comment in the comment section below. I'll try to answer them all. If you have any questions, you can ask them there. If you want to download our trainings, we have our 12 trainings for service businesses. So if you want to download those, they're going to be linked in the description below. Let me just give you back the preview of these. So you see here, we have the SEO training. We have a website optimization training, which covers a lot, website design and structure and site speed. And then we have offsite optimization trainings as well. All these for free. You can access them in the description below. So that's pretty much it for me. So thank you for watching and hope to get you on the next video. Bye-bye.